President Trump has deployed 2 nuclear submarines near Russia, escalating tensions with Moscow, and it also actually breaks decades of Pentagon secrecy.
The move follows a fiery exchange online with Dmitry Medvedev. Remember him? He's Russia's former president, but he was having a right go. He warned Donald Trump to soften his stance on Ukraine, and he reminded him of Moscow's nuclear arsenal.
Well, deployments like this are normally kept secret. They've only been revealed in the past during major crises, like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
So here's what the president told reporters outside the White House.
We just have to be careful. And a threat was made, and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people.
Let's talk to the deputy editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Freddie, good morning to you. What do you make of all of this? Is this a sensible response in the fact that it's almost like a game of chicken, isn't it?
Well, chicken's quite a good way of putting it. It's been a bananas week from Donald Trump. We've had so much news in so many directions. We've had trade wars, we've had good news about the economy, then there was rather bad news about the economy, which I think might be connected to this story. There was a very negative jobs report, and we know what Donald Trump likes to do whenever he has bad news. It's create a major distraction. And this is pretty major and a pretty dramatic distraction, 2 nuclear submarines heading near Russia. It's also really about how, in this day and age, social media can start conflicts. Medvedev is a former prime minister of president of Russia, I should say, interim president between Putin's reigns. And but he's now more of a social media troll, really. He just says aggressive things on social media quite a lot, like a lot of international leaders do. And that has escalated into a nuclear threat, a threat of nuclear war, which is not to be sniffed at. I mean, I think you have to take everything with a pinch of salt with Trump, but these are real nuclear submarines. And so it's sort of dangerous and silly at the same time.
Yes, it's sort of frightening and reassuring at the same time, because people who've lived through the Cold War know that this sort of thing happened. There were always insults being traded and nuclear arsenals moved around, and yet luckily, nothing terrible happened. Now you don't know whether or not it's reassuring that, oh, here we go again, or whether actually the climate is different this time and things could escalate.
Well, I think a lot of people, a lot of British, deep state types, for want of a better word, will be relieved that Trump is now taking an increasingly hostile position towards Russia. I mean, everyone will remember, of course, that when he came in, he seemed to want to end the war. He seemed to want to offer Putin a peace deal on very favourable terms to Putin. But that has completely changed. He's very disappointed with Putin. He's increasingly irate at the way Russia has treated him. He didn't get the help from Russia that he wanted on Iran, let alone Ukraine. And so now he's escalating the aggression against them. And I think, for a lot of British foreign policy thinkers, that's exactly what they've wanted all along.
How much of a threat is it really because it's Medvedev and not Putin, because it's talking about Soviet-era strike capability, which, frankly, must be falling apart at the seams, one would imagine, at the moment. Is it really that much of a threat posed by Moscow on this?
I mean, yes. I mean, the Russian nuclear threat's very real. It may be very old, but they have a bigger arsenal, I think, than anyone else in the world, including America, in theory. Of course, a lot of it might not work, but I'm sure enough of it works to destroy the planet several times over. Yeah. So, yes, it is a very serious threat. But as I say, it has this silliness alongside it because it's triggered by social media. But just because something's silly doesn't mean it's not able to result in the destruction of the world.
What do you think Putin will think of Medvedev getting involved in a sort of spat with President Trump? Will he sit back and just watch them and be amused about it, or will he be really upset? Or is Medvedev doing Putin's work for him?
I strongly suspect Medvedev wouldn't have done it without knowing that Putin would approve, or Putin's explicit approval. He is very much a kind of sock puppet figure for Vladimir Putin. So I think Putin will know about it. He won't. I don't think he's not going to. Medvedev's not going to be in trouble now. it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few days. I suspect we'll have another phone call between Donald Trump and Putin, and it might end up with Trump going on Truth Social and saying, just had a great phone call with Vladimir Putin, we're going to end the war in Ukraine. Even if the war is not going to end in Ukraine, Trump will claim some kind of victory, because that's how he does diplomacy.
All right, Freddie, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much. Let's talk to the host of the People's Politics podcast, Paul Duddridge, who's in Los Angeles. Paul, good to see you this morning. I mean, we talk about the fact that these deployments are normally kept secret. This is gamesmanship and brinksmanship, isn't it? I mean, there'd be no point in keeping it secret.
It really is brinksmanship, and it's being carried out on Truth Social. I was just going to say the nuclear warning from Dmitry Medvedev that you just referred to, which is kind of chilling, and I sort of totally understand why Trump is acting on this, is in response to Trump demanding a ceasefire from Russia in Ukraine and putting a time limit on it and threatening sanctions unless Medvedev has referred to a dead hand threat, which apparently is old Soviet Cold War vernacular for nuclear. And that's apparently what has triggered Trump to respond in sending these nuclear submarines to, precisely, he sent them to a, where's the location? He won't say it, to be positioned in the appropriate regions, but they won't give any operational precision on that. But they're two nuclear submarines. We don't actually know whether they're nuclear powered or nuclear capability, nuclear armed. So
exactly.
That's kind of like an interesting little
Yes,
variety.
It would be an interesting sub-question that he probably wouldn't answer now. But don't we already know that there is a substantial nuclear, well, I don't know what you call it, arsenal, pack of submarines, whatever, out near Moscow anyway? I mean, they're already deployed. This is just showmanship, as we were saying.
As you say, yes, exactly. I think it's brinksmanship, it's showmanship. This is a... I don't want to be indelicate, but it's some kind of contest. There is basically a war of words going on between Medvedev and Trump, and a show of respect and disrespect from either party. Because I think now Medvedev, the former president of Russia, is now the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, and he is definitely not... He's being the proxy for... He's been the proxy for Putin. So Putin doesn't have to actually enter into such an ugly war of words. Medvedev is able to actually have these public spats. And he's quite happy to raise the temperature and not accept any conditions from the United States. And so that's really what's happening. But as you say, it's theatrical. It is definitely a show of strength, and it's a war of words. But I do think it will de-escalate, but it's looking very, very sort of handbags at dawn at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, and you don't want to make this more than it is. However, it of course carries an implied threat that countries are prepared to use all this. Now, of course, you've got to hope beyond hope that never ever happens, but it's the fact it's being threatened which causes a lot of concern. It does feel like the Cold War all over again.
Well, quite. And look, and as you just pointed out, there are already subs there. There's two new being sent, but there are already two in place anyway, and there's a whole arsenal pointed at one another at all times anyway. So it's largely symbolic to add any more grist to the mill. It's largely, OK, well, now we're going to have two more. These are the two largest nuclear armed countries on Earth. And so they're constantly deployed towards one another anyway. So, like I said, adding a couple more is definitely more of a theatrical deployment rather than actually tactical. And to the extent that we don't even know, like I said, whether it's nuclear powered or nuclear armed.
I mean, for those of us who are old enough to remember what it's like living through the Cold War, insults like this were exchanged all the time. And then look what happened historically. Thank goodness nothing ever happened. But is this a different world now where these sort of insults being traded, submarines being sent halfway across the world, is life different now, and could it be more dangerous?
Look, it could be. I actually think You're 100% right. I think it's less dangerous. And again, I could be being naive or shucks about it. I'm really happy that stuff is playing out in social media. I'm much happier that this is playing out in the open. If you think of the little skirmishes that we experienced during the Cold War, we might not know for days that something had actually happened and that brinksmanship had been taking place, because it was such a shrouded information exchange between the superpowers. Now everything's playing out in real time on social media, and I think it de-escalates in real time much more quickly than perhaps it used to. So I'm actually, a giddy optimist as far as this stuff's concerned. I do think this is a show of strength about the fact that Trump wanted Putin to play ball and give him some red meat, give him some concession about Ukraine, give him some promise of a ceasefire. And as he hasn't, I think he's pretty peeved and is prepared to keep escalating. And obviously, the threat of sanctions doesn't seem to have really rattled Russia at this point. What's very odd, though, when you look at since Trump got into power with all of this, I mean, we've gone from President Zelensky being the man who was being, in effect, blamed for this situation when he was in the White House and being ridiculed in the White House to now the shoe being on the other foot. Well, quite. And look, it also gives the lie to the idea that Trump is Putin's puppet as well. So I think that there's a lot of preconceptions that we might have held even a few months ago, where, yes, we are now looking at, like I said, Trump made great store by being the friend of world leaders and being friends and being able to reach out to Putin. I will solve this war on day one, etc. And so just on a PR level, and I'm not trying to be flippant about Trump's sincerity, but on a PR level, he does look slightly emasculated by not being able to deal with Putin as effectively as perhaps he had once promised. And as I said, Zelensky now is looking more like the reasonable broker. He's looking more like the honest broker than perhaps he was initially portrayed by the Trump administration. OK, Paul Doddridge, good to see you. Thank you.
I must say, it is extraordinary what can happen in just a few weeks at the moment, isn't it?